Okay. Well, I would like to honor your time for being very timely with us. I would like to introduce to you Lisa Andrew, Dr. Lisa Andrew. She is the president and the CEO of the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, and she will kickstart the event tonight.
Great. Thank you, V. Welcome, 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 everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Beautiful day outside. You're choosing to be with us for this very, very important and special version of Bold Conversations. So we are the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. We are so committed to raising up communities of color, making sure that our students who are furthest from access and opportunity have access and opportunity to college and career, whatever their dreams are. We're very interested in increasing the economic mobility of the Bay Area so that we can create the workforce that becomes the workforce of Silicon Valley. We have a vision of everyone, every student becoming a productive adult, whatever that is to them, successful and productive. We just want to make sure they have access and opportunity to explore that. Our mission is that we advocate, which is what we're doing here, advocating, bringing people together, as well as deliver direct and indirect services around STEM education, again, to inspire our underserved students. So thank you for being with us today to be a part of fulfilling our mission as well as our vision. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose of this initiative? We feel that as an organization, we need to be a part of confronting issues of race and equity in society and how they impact education. We are using our platform so that we can provide a space for folks to have these conversations, to possibly learn a different perspective, hear a different perspective that they don't have an opportunity to be a part of in their everyday life. Again, ensuring that access and opportunity for students of color, as well as fulfilling our obligation to respond to what's happening now. So what's being said in the community, how do we understand that? How do we leverage that? What is our role in moving forward? So how will we know when we are wildly successful? Is we know that we will have been a part of shifting adult mindset and encouraging courageous conversations. These are not easy. It's an ongoing journey. And we know that as adults, we need to hear a lot, see a lot, feel a lot, so that we can experience things that'll maybe question where we're currently sitting with something, and how our behaviors and actions are affecting others or affecting our community. So we know that we are successful when we have helped to do some shifts, as well as encourage others to have conversations outside of this setting and in this setting. So how do we do, or so what's happening today? What is happening today is we are studying the first condition of Glenn Singleton's Courageous Conversations About Race. And that first condition is getting personal right here, right now. And this is why we have invited Chris Singleton to share his story, and how he has moved through some experiences that are quite traumatic, and where he is sitting currently in his personal mindset around conversations about race and equity. So we will be doing some whole group as well as working in breakouts. We sure hope that you stay and participate in your breakout group. We are all in varying levels and degrees and spaces and places. There is no one right way to be, but we do know that we must be together and having these conversations in order to move forward, each of us, and whatever that means to us. There's always a challenge to action. It's great to be in conversation or in listening, but we also need to put our ideas, put our convictions into action so that we can be part of the change and leveraging the platforms that we have. And then we will hear again from Chris Singleton sharing his story and what he has done in putting a challenge into action. So how do we do this? How do we sit in this space? How do we have a courageous conversation? What are some of the ways in which we can be respectful, but still be courageous and maybe a bit challenging? And that is that we stay engaged. And thank you, V, for encouraging folks as they signed on to give us your full attention. I know I'm at home here today and there's plenty of other things that want my attention, but I know that if I stay engaged, that's the best way that I can get the most out of this time. We also encourage you to speak your truth with respect. Speaking our truth sometimes is hard. Hearing someone else's truth is sometimes hard, but we know that we come to this space with a respectful ears, respectful tongue, respectful heart, and try and sit with that. And sometimes when we speak our truth, it's uncomfortable. Sometimes when we hear someone else's truth, it's uncomfortable. And that's part of it. That's how you know you're in a courageous conversation, is when you're speaking your truth. Maybe you experience discomfort because your mindset or your beliefs might be in question or challenged, or you just have some intellectual unrest going on inside of you. And you need to expect and accept non-closure. This isn't about we start here and we're going to start at A and we're going to end at C, or we're going to end at D. We may be at A and you may go to A1 or A2, or you may go all the way to Z or not. It's not the purpose of any one conversation to be this is the end. For some, it's the beginning. For others, it's the middle. And then we just keep going and going. So keeping in mind as you sit in this space with us and participate in this space with us to please stay engaged, speak your truth with respect. Experience discomfort is part of the normal process, and then accepting and expecting non-closure.
Hey, line up, everybody line up. We're about to race. Everybody line up. Shoulder to shoulder, take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up, we're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this, a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm gonna make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, There's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
So good evening, everyone. So at this time, we're going to have access to a Jamboard, and you're going to be able to record any reflection or how this might have resonated with you. It's not going to be a long activity, but use the sticky notes to share something about this video clip. It could be something as simple as how you've confronted something in your life, or have you ever been given a time to move ahead? So that is just a very quick reflection, and we're going to have access, and we're not going into breakout groups. We're going to just do this in the whole group. So I see folks are jumping on.
And for those who are unfamiliar with the Jamboard, you can find a little sticky note here at one of the tools. Click here, and you're going to be able to insert whatever comments that you would like to leave on the board for us, and then click save. I see that people are already sharing their thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. You see something?
Just a few more seconds and then we'll see if anyone wants to make a outward comment about it or not. There's some great responses here. Some are really small that I can't read. Very powerful demonstration of power and privilege that everyone should see. And this one was intriguing to me, that they hope that the folks out in front would choose not to run at all. Mhm. Mm. And just keeping it in alignment with our theme today and talking about the telling the story like here and now. I know there were lots of stories out on that field, you know, wherever they were positioned, but definitely lots of stories. And one thing that made me think of that is getting to know the person running with or alongside you or behind you or in front of you. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Find a way to bring those behind you along with you. All right. So just leaving a minute or so for any commentary that anyone wanted to share out. You have some really good thoughts here. Really appreciate that. Getting your thoughts out like that. Did anyone want to speak?
I thought about what would this activity be like if you were asking, a group of staff, give yourself a point if someone told you to apply for your current position. Give someone a point, give yourself a point if someone told you the questions that were going to be on the interview. Give yourself, because I think those same type of disparities happen not only in this setting, but also in work institutions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
So I want to say that I've seen this activity done multiple times, and I've seen adults who participated in this for the first time burst into tears. And I felt, I tried to put it in, but I guess my comment was too long over there, that when this is done, the race should be reversed and you should turn around and run the other way. So to give people who, um, to let other people experience what it is to be at a disadvantage. Because sometimes all you feel when you're standing up front, I've heard, a lot of us saying that, oh, I realize how privileged I am, but do you realize how unprivileged others are? I think there's a huge distinction between the two, to recognize and accept that, you're from privilege, or to know how the others feel.
Thank you. Good point.
I'm always concerned. I get the make others feel empathy and feel what it's like to not have the privileges that we've enjoyed or haven't realized until now, maybe haven't taken stock of. But at the same time, is it necessary to hold me back to give others a chance? And I think that's the most difficult part of the conversation is I understand. And I believe in some areas of my life, I do know what it's like to have been held back, but those aren't the most important, that has nothing to do with career. And therefore I do recognize the privileges I've had in my career. But is it really necessary for me to stop running so that someone else can start running? Or is there a way that I can help? I don't know.
All right. Thank you for those thoughts and those reflections. So continuing with the content of our mentor text authored by Glenn Singleton. Some of you were here a couple months ago when we had that privileged time with him. We are going to focus on the first condition, which is as we're moving through our journey and supporting it with the content of his book. So he speaks to the notion that if we are to develop a fuller understanding of race, we must first look deeply at our own racial existence as a doorway to understanding the complexities of race. This is why the first conditions of courageous conversations prompts us to examine our own personal, local, and immediate circumstances related to race. And you see on this slide that it also speaks to impacting of race in your life, the degree of racial consciousness, and also racial consciousness versus racial unconsciousness. And as we move through our activities today, we're going to be having some dialogue around these big ideas, which will help us become more personally aware of our own racialized existence. And this helps us to understand racial experiences of others. So we are very hopeful that this will add some value added to your understanding and help you to revisit your own thoughts around understanding race. And as you see, the book there on the far right corner, this is where our content is coming from. And we're moving through this resource as a foundation for our conversations. So just hoping that you will continue to stay in the mode with us around this, because we feel that it's really great content. And as you heard from Glenn, we're not Glenn, but we are supporting his work and continuing this work to help you understand and continue the race conversation. So we're going to have a really great resource that Bee is going to share with you when you go to the breakout room, and a tool to help guide these conversations that we'll have about these big ideas. And there'll be some reflection time also.
Thank you so much, Denise. So the resource that Denise was talking about is the Courageous Conversation Journal. And this is an exercise that we put together into a one-pager for you, and we just drop it in the chat so you can make your own, you can make a copy of this journal for yourself. And for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to go through this whole journal together within the breakout room. The facilitator going to guide you through part 1, part 2, and we are going to come back and conclude together with part 3. So for the next few slides, I would like to share with you exactly what are you going to be doing in the breakout room. In the breakout room, the first part of the Courageous Conversation Journal asks for you to answer this one simple question. Or is it simple? To what degree? And in what ways does race impact your own personal life? You can choose to record your own response in your own journal, or you can share it within your breakout room. However you want to share, it is entirely up to you. The second part of the breakout room is that we ask you to calculate your racial consciousness in a scale of 0 to 100. Where do you think that race impacts your life? And again, we want to utilize the Jamboard to bring you back there and help us identify where is your percentage, because within our small group today, imagine this is our actual society. Is it going to be a lot of it? Is it going to be 25%, or is it a lot of it going to be 100%? And 0% means that race is not a problem. What is race? I've never heard of race before, or I've never heard of a racial problem before. And 100% here means that I experience racial impact every single second and minute in my life. So wherever you are in your life, we would love for you to share with us as a second part of the breakout room. And the last part is, as we are going to be able to see in that scale various percentages along that line. These are going to be the two questions that we ask the facilitator to ask you, and have a rich conversations within your breakout room before we bring you back into the main room to share a little bit more with us. The breakout room this time is going to be around 20 minutes. So we hope that you're going to find some safe space within the breakout room to open up and to go through this journal with your facilitator. This is going to be the list of the facilitators that we have for our conversations today: Dr. Eric Andrew, Manny Babara, Rosemary Kamei, Deb Negrete, Gucci Trinidad. These are our Courageous Conversations facilitators, and we hope that you're going to have a good time in the breakout room. And if you have any questions, you can always go back here and let us know. So in the chat, there is a questions about, can you define impact? Yes. And is impact positive or negative? Is impact what I see someone deal with, or what I personally experience? For the context of this exercise, we ask you to do a self-reflection. So the impacts can be positive or negative depending on you, right? And we do ask that you, within the reflection aspect, we ask that you look within yourself. And this whole 20 minutes is going to be focusing on your personal experience, not somebody else. And the whole point is that we would love to provide this opportunity for you to be able to hear how others experience race, and how they have their own personal stories dealing with race and whatnot. So the word impact here, thank you for the questions, but I will let you define it for yourself, because impact for me means very different. Does it make me feel happy? Does it make me feel sad? Does it make me feel disappointed or angry? All those emotions are under impact, right? So I would not define it to restrict the boundaries of the impact for you. I will let you decide the impact for yourself. All right, any other questions? Otherwise, I will be sending everybody to the breakout room, and I hope you will enjoy the breakout room.
Listening in on some of the sessions thus far, and I got to tell you, that was some phenomenal dialogue. I was sitting there listening, like, man, right? Nobody feels. I guess maybe you do feel weird about saying it, but you guys are asking questions, saying things that maybe you probably wouldn't say in other places. So I think that's what today's for. And so I want to applaud you guys for having enough courage to do so. And so I quickly want to, start off by saying I'm a husband and a father now. I'm super young, but I have the opportunity to be married to my high school sweetheart, been together for 9 years. She's my everything. I've got a son, CJ, and a son on the way, Caden. And so when people ask me, Chris, why do you go out and speak about the things you share about, right? You're talking about love. You're talking about unity. You're talking about forgiveness after your mother was murdered because she's Black. And people will ask me what my why is, my quote unquote why, but I don't really believe in a why. I think everybody's got the same why. If I ask all of you guys, do you want to, be successful for your family? I think you'll say, absolutely, I do. Right? If I ask you, do you want to make the world a better place? I think everybody's going to say, yeah. But for me, I have something called a struggle moment. The struggle moment is the reason why I can be on the road 150 days a year and miss my family, miss my 3-year-old son, and I miss my brother and sister who I care after. But I continue to do the work. And my struggle moment is simple. It's 5 numbers. I'm going to share these 5 numbers with you guys. And so you'll see why I'm so passionate about what I do, why I do what I do. So we got 1 right here. We got 70, 50, 9, and 1. These 5 numbers, 1, 70, 50, 9, and 1, are the reason why my struggle moment pushes me forward. There was just one person that was misled and misinformed to hate Black people. And he was racist. And what he did was he walked into my church and he fired over 70 bullets. And while people were holding hands and praying in my church, over 50 of those actually entered bodies. This man took 9 lives, and one of those lives happened to be my mom, my everything. Right? If you would have asked her, she would have said she was all that in a bag of chips. And so when somebody asks me about my why, I don't give them that. I give them those 5 numbers. And it's led me to talk about things that are difficult, but ultimately it's led me to have this mission of unity. Now, unity for me doesn't look like we all sit by the campfire and sing a country song. Maybe you like Usher. You might not like Keith Urban. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you like Usher like me. But unity means for me, I'm going to respect you, right, as a human being. And that's what the core of it is for me. There's 2 questions people ask me. They'll ask me why I speak. And number 2, they'll ask me, why do I do it so young? And I always say, I don't have the luxury of thinking I'll be 70, 80, 90 years old when I pass away because my parents didn't see 50. Right. My grandparents didn't get to see 60. They weren't lucky or blessed enough or fortunate enough, whatever you want to call it, to be able to see that number. So I'm 25 and I share every single day. Every single time I have an opportunity to share, to change somebody's heart. That's all I'm trying to do. You see, I'd never be so arrogant to think that I can come into an organization or come on here and tell you guys how to live your lives, because I think that's extremely arrogant of somebody to do. I'll just share my heart, share my perspective, and hopefully you guys will be like, you know what? That's pretty cool to think about something like that. And so with that being said, I want to jump right into it. And I love talking about race. I love talking about these controversial things. And people ask me, well, Chris, how do you do that? Because I want to talk about that stuff, but it's awkward, especially knowing if somebody thinks differently than me. You see, me, I speak to, companies all across the country. And sometimes when I'm going into a Fortune 50 company speaking, they see a young Black man coming to talk about race and they automatically want to stop listening. And so what I do is I have an exercise where I say, you know what, this is the way that we lower all of the walls people put up initially. I say, we got to share our story. You see, for some reason, we forgot that everybody has a story behind their opinion. Everybody does, right? I think there's 2 reasons why we believe what we believe. Number 1, either you were taught it, or number 2, you had an experience that made you believe whatever it is that you believe now. And so for me, I automatically go straight to the story before I hear their opinion, because I may know it might be different. I want to hear about them, who they are as a person. And so I'll give you guys a quick example of what this looks like. So I'll share my story real quick. So a young Black man, I married my high school sweetheart. We actually got married on Lifetime, right? Live TV. It was a free wedding too. It was awesome. And it was free, right? I unfortunately had to take care of my brother and sister pretty young. So I was 20, 21, taking care of teenagers. I've got my son, Caden, on the way now. Hopefully my wife will let me name him LeBron. I don't know if she'll let me because he's my favorite player, but we're still arguing on that one. But one thing about me that's really sad is that I lost my mom in the worst way possible, right? She was actually shot 6 times while she was praying. And because she was shot 6 times while she was praying, I don't like guns. You see, I shared my story before I shared my opinion. So when you hear what happened to my mom, maybe you understand why I don't like guns. There's some empathy there. And you see, I have a friend of mine. I don't say his name in my talks no more because he said, Chris, you keep saying my name, you have to cut me a check. I said, okay, I'm not saying your name no more. But my buddy, he grew up and I'm in South Carolina, guys. I know you, it's a little different. It's already dark out here. But in South Carolina, people go hunting all the time. And I'm not a super country boy by any means, but my friend said he grew up and he was going hunting by the time he was 8 years old. And so he's out there hunting with his grandfather. He was 8. And he tells me he was so nervous when he was hunting. I've never been hunting, so I don't know. But he said you get super nervous, like the shaking kind of nervous. You ever had a presentation in class and you got so nervous you had the butterflies, or maybe you had to say something in work in front of everybody and your voice start cracking and you like, oh my goodness, I hope I get through this, right? He said that's the kind of nervous that he was. But what he said was his grandfather told him to hold his breath. And so he did that. He held his breath. He pulled the trigger, he killed his first buck, and he was super excited about it. He said, I was so excited. My grandfather picked me up. He squeezed me so tight, I couldn't even breathe. That's what he told me. And he follows up that story with telling me how his grandfather is no longer here, but he goes hunting all the time. And he says, Chris, I know you're a super spiritual person. Like, I know that's you, but that's not me. But one thing about me is, he said, Chris, I feel like my grandfather's still here when I go hunting. And so when he follows up that story with telling me his stance on how he loves guns, guess what? I can understand. Why? Because I heard his story before his opinion. And far too often we see somebody's political party, right? We see somebody's stance on whatever it may be. And we forget there's a story behind that opinion, just like you have a story behind yours. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I wanted to quickly jump things off with, because I was listening to the breakout rooms and I'm like, man, this is phenomenal. I have to get that out of the way and share this first. And so hopefully right now you'll have the walls dropped. You've heard my story, and my story is a pretty sad one. But it doesn't end there. You see, with me, I remember being 18 years old and I actually played college baseball, and I only wanted 2 things in my life at the time when I was playing baseball. Number 1, I wanted to get drafted, make some money. And number 2, I wanted to buy my mom a Range Rover, right? That's all I wanted, because my mom was a teacher and I knew how her pockets were. You know what I'm saying? Like I knew what they were at the time. And so that's all I wanted in my life. And things changed for me on June 17, 2015, the day that Ms. Denise actually shared with you all about me losing my mom. And so I call that day the unthinkable, because we see that stuff on TV. We see it in the newspapers, right? But we never in a million years think it would happen to us. And so for me, the unthinkable was I got a call on my phone, and I remember seeing my mom's name. Now, the way that I was raised, right, if my mother's calling me on my phone, I got about 2 rings to pick it up, or she's going to tell me about myself once I answer, right? And so I answered the phone like I would any other time. But the lady on the other end, she was pretty frantic and screaming and yelling, and said I had to rush down to our church. And so I got down to our church, and I remember there was yellow caution tape everywhere. And I'm pretty scared at the time, so I just bob and weave through it and finally get to my church. And there was an officer there. Now, the officer was doing his job, but I was so nervous and scared. I kind of, asked him, hey, you got to let me inside my church. Watch out, man. And he looked at me, he said, I can't do that. And I said, no disrespect, I know you're doing your job, but somebody called me from my mother's phone and it's not her. You got to let me inside. The guy said, I can't do it. He said, what's your name? I said, my name's Chris Singleton. I've been going to this church for the last 7 years since I've been living in Charleston, South Carolina. Great-grandfather went to this church. My mother is a children's church pastor at this church. He said to me, okay, well, Chris, I can't let you in, but I can show you where you need to be. So he walked me about a couple blocks away until I got to the Embassy Suites Hotel. When I got there was a lady by the name of Miss Felicia Sanders at our church. It was a very tight-knit community, right? AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church. And so we got to the Embassy Suites, and I saw Miss Felicia, and she looked at me, and I realized Miss Felicia was the one that called me on my mom's phone. And she said to me, Chris, your mom got shot. And now immediately I'm thinking my mother got shot, but surely she's okay. Maybe she got shot in her leg or her arm somewhere, but my mom's got to be all right. And I remember thinking that, and, finally walking upstairs into this big open room. And as I'm sitting there, guys, I realized something. I realized that I was privileged. You see, I heard one of our friends, I can't remember which breakout room I was in, but I heard somebody talking about how they worked extremely hard to get to where they were, and they didn't really grow up with much. And I don't think that's what privilege is, to be honest with you. You know, we hear the words white privilege right now, and immediately most people say, you know, I've worked extremely hard to get to where I'm at. Well, you can still work extremely hard and be privileged. You see, I was privileged at the time because I didn't know who the coroner was. I didn't know. I was privileged because I never missed a meal. I was privileged because both of my parents went to college. Did they work extremely hard to get there? Absolutely. Did I work extremely hard to play Division I baseball? Absolutely. But I was privileged. Does it make me a bad person to be privileged? Absolutely not. I think the only fault is if we don't realize that we are privileged. You see, I was privileged in that day, and I think we're all privileged. Can I be honest with you guys? If we have clean drinking water, I think we're privileged. I think we are. But oftentimes we hear white privilege and we automatically cringe as if it's the worst thing in the world to have. No, there's nothing wrong with that. Should I feel guilty about having clean drinking water? I don't think I should feel guilty. But I think there should be a feeling if we know somebody else doesn't have clean drinking water and we just say, I worked extremely hard. Well, yes, that's okay, but I still have clean drinking water. Doesn't make me a bad person. And so I was privileged because a lady came up to me and she said, Chris, I'm the coroner. Now, I told you my mother was a children's church pastor, right? My mom was also from Newark, New Jersey. I don't know if you guys know where Newark, New Jersey is, but my mother was, she was a loving mother. She was a children's church pastor, but you better not mess with her babies, right? That's the kind of mom my mom was, right? She was the kind of mom, if it was late at night, she was going to walk, she was going to pray, but she was going to have some keys in between her fingers just to make sure nobody tried one of her babies, right? That's the kind of mom that I had. And so I'm sitting there and the lady introduced herself and I have no clue who she is. But she asked me a question I'll never forget. She looked at me and she said, Chris, can you describe your mom? Now, this is how privileged I was, guys. When she's telling me to describe my mom, I'm thinking, okay, well, I have no clue who the coroner is. But she said, describe my mom. And I'm thinking, now she's telling me to describe her. Like, it must be so bad that you can't tell me what she looks like. And immediately I started hoping for the worst, but I was thinking hoping for the best, but I was thinking the worst. Like I said, surely my mom was okay, but you're telling me to describe her. Like now somebody shot my mother so bad, you can't even tell me what she looks like. And I described my mom. I said, you know what? She's got to be the one that's okay, right? She's not getting her PhD right now for nothing, right? She's not doing all this that she was doing her whole life for nothing. And so I described her. I said, she's 5'9", short, black, curly hair. I said she wore a suit when she left the house. I started thinking about my mom, everything about her, right? Always smiling, right? She's, she went natural. I don't know if you guys know what natural is, right? She cut her hair off, so she had the short curls at the time. You know what I'm saying? Right. And so I'm describing everything about my mom, and she stops me. She says, Chris, is there anything else you can tell me? Maybe something that would make her stand out. And in this moment, I said, okay, you know what? She's got earrings, right? Ears pierced. She said, any tattoos? I said, whoa, my mother's a children's church pastor now. I said, if she's alive, she's going to kill me. And she smiled thinking, why would I make a joke in that time? Right. But I remember, saying to her, yeah, she's a children's church pastor. She said, well, what's her tattoo? I said, you ever seen an ice cream cone? She said, yeah, I have. I said, you ever seen the word sexy? She said, yes, I have, Chris. I said, well, on her left ankle, she's got a tattoo. It says sexy chocolate with an ice cream cone. And she smiled at me and said, children's church pastor, huh, Chris? I said, it had to be before she got saved. I don't know. You know what I mean? Children's church pastor, though. And so we smiled about my mom's sexy chocolate tattoo. And, she walked away. I think it was probably 5 or 6 minutes that went by. And finally, the unthinkable came true. The unthinkable when she came back and said, Chris, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's confirmed your mother has been shot and killed tonight. You see, the unthinkable for me was having to tell my little brother, Caleb, my little sister, Cameron, that mom was gone. Right? No more kisses on the cheek after a game, all because someone was misinformed and misled to hate Black people. And that's exactly what happened. And so after the unthinkable, I said, you know what? I actually forgave my mother's killer. And I realized why I forgave my mother's killer. At the time, I had no clue. Because if you would have told me I would forgive my mother's killer for killing her because she's Black, I would have said, you're crazy. Ain't no way in the world. But I realized now why forgiveness was placed on me, because Number one, forgiveness isn't always for the other person. There's a quote that says, forgiveness is setting a prisoner free only to later realize that you yourself are the prisoner. Now, for me, it doesn't mean that I wasn't upset about what happened. I devoted my life to stopping stuff like this from happening in the future. But I forgave my mother's killer. And I realized how powerful forgiveness was. Like literally a month ago, I'm still realizing how powerful it is. I was speaking at an engagement. Somebody asked me a question. They said, hey, Chris, where's your mother's killer being held? I said, you know what? I don't even know. I know we got the death penalty after that. I don't know. He's never said sorry. And guess what? Forgiveness has freed me from needing a sorry. And so I set out on my life to have a mission. And the mission is to bring people together. The mission is to remind people, because somewhere along the lines, we forgot that nobody chooses their skin color. Nobody chooses their first language. Nobody chooses where they're born or who they're born to. So I would never hate you for those things. And you should never hate me for them, because we didn't choose them. And it's that simple. I just met with my police chief of Charleston, South Carolina. I just met with him yesterday. We had breakfast. One thing I like to do is, before I complain about something, I want to make sure I have a solution or be a part of the solution. And so I'm sitting down with him and I'm talking about things with him. And he's, sharing stuff to me. I'm sharing stuff back to him, and we're recommending this, recommending that. And I asked him about where he was from and the way he grew up. And we finally came to the conclusion that sometimes you can't judge somebody based on where they're from or the situation they're in, because you have no idea who their parent may be or their lack of. You have no idea how they were raised or the lack of being raised. And so often we immediately forget, oh, okay, boom. You're sharing, you're speaking like this, or the way that you're living is because of you, not realizing there were so many influences in their life that maybe got to them to where they're at right there. With me personally, man, there's a good book that says, raise a child up in the way he should go, and when he grows old, he won't depart from it. And so when I hear stuff like that, I start thinking, okay, well, if that person or that child hasn't been raised up by a parent, by a grandparent, by a strong educator, by a teacher, by an administrator, like if they don't have that person in their life, they may grow up in a rough spot. And so what am I going to do? Automatically judge them based on something they didn't control? Absolutely not. I'm going to pour into them, and I'm going to share my story, and hopefully they'll hear my opinion, and maybe that can change their trajectory of their lives. And often I talk about teaching. Like, people ask me, what can I do, Chris? I'm not a speaker. I'm not a diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging expert. And they'll ask me, what can they do? And I always say, just be a teacher, right? Just teach love. Teach people that you shouldn't judge somebody based on their first language, because we didn't choose ours. I think it's so simple what we should be teaching, but a lot of times we make it more complex than it needs to be. You see, I've noticed this. We always want to be politically correct. Can I be honest with you guys? Everybody wants to be politically correct. Everybody does. I want to be politically correct, especially doing what I do. But I realized something. Relationships will always supersede being politically correct. I'll say it one more time. The relationships we have will always supersede being politically correct. So I'll give you an example. So I spoke at this school one time. This is probably 4 years ago. I was speaking at this school, and I said, it doesn't matter what your sexual preference is, right? That's what I said. It doesn't matter what your sexual preference is. I'm going to love you anyway. And I remember connecting with I think it was the headmaster of the school, or not headmaster, but whoever ran the school, not a principal, it was a private school. And he said, Chris, let me tell you something. He said, we don't say sexual preference. He says, Chris, I like, men. I've been this way for a while, and it's not my preference. This is who I am. This is my orientation. Sexual orientation is what you should say, Chris. And he knows I'm a man of faith, and he was the opposite of a man of faith. But he said this to me, and afterwards I said, okay, well, since you taught me that, would you mind bringing me back in to speak again? Because I just learned something from you. You know what? He brought me in 3 more times to speak to all of his students. And I think far too often we think we have to be politically correct or we'll get canceled. That's what we think. We have to be politically correct or we'll get canceled, is what people say. Chris, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Well, if you say the wrong thing behind closed doors or to somebody you have a relationship with, you won't say it out in the open and get canceled. But the problem is we don't have anybody to bounce that off of. We don't have those relationships. So then we may say the wrong thing and everybody gets offended by it. If you have that relationship, like I do with my friends, they'll say, Chris, what do you prefer? Do you want me to call you black, man? You African American? What do you want me to call you, man? To be honest with you, I'm just trying to learn from you. And then I share my truth. I was reading the notes of today's engagement, and I saw it talking about sharing your truth. And a lot of times people that look like me will say, Chris, I don't, why do I have to be the person that's always, talking about this or talking about that? Like, I don't want to talk about it, Chris. And they'll say this to me, and I understand, I truly do. But I'll tell you why I think we should share our truth. There's a quote from Maya Angelou. She says, I come as one, but stand as 10,000. I'll say it one more time. I come as one, but stand as 10,000. And so I was speaking at a law office, and a lady said, she's a black lady, Chris, why do I always have to be the one that talks about this or talks about that? And for me, I said, we have to switch our perspective on it. We have the opportunity to share our truth. Whereas our great grandparents, they didn't have that opportunity. They didn't. So stop thinking stop thinking about it as a obligation and start thinking about it as an opportunity to share who you are and share your truth. And that's all that I think we should be doing. If we come as one, but stand as 10,000, that means all of our ancestors are saying, you know what? They didn't care about my story, but they care about yours. So share it. And that's all we have to do, guys, is share your truth and teach in those moments. I'm going to share a quick story about teaching. Now, before I do it, my lights have gone out behind me, and I don't want you guys to not be able to see me because I'm a little dark skinned, and I don't know if you can tell. But I need that light. So give me 1 second. I'll turn back on. Then I'll tell you guys my story of this teaching.
While Chris is turning the light back on, I would like to remind everybody that there is a sign-in sheet in the chat. It's an opportunity for you to enter the end of the session raffle to get one of his personally signed book. Your Life Matters is his brand new book. And for those who already signed in, thank you so much. We do ask you to stay until the end of the session to receive the raffle.
All right, so this is my story about teaching, right? Because you don't have to be, you don't have to have 20 different degrees to be able to teach, okay? We can all teach, whether it's our families, whether it's our coworkers. We can share our truth, like I just said. I'm gonna share a quick story about teaching. I've only got a couple minutes, but hopefully I can go over on time and nobody will get mad at me. But this story was, I was playing baseball. Now I was playing minor league baseball. I don't know if you guys know the difference between minor leagues and major leagues. If you don't know, I'm gonna tell you real quick. So you get a check in the major leagues, a lot of zeros before the decimal point, okay? In the minor leagues, them jokers come after the decimal point, okay? That's the big difference in major leagues and minor leagues. And so I was playing in the minor leagues, and I was actually living in South Bend, Indiana. It was freezing, right? I was playing baseball in the cold for the first time. I'm a Southern boy. I might not have a Southern accent, but I'm from the South, man. I don't know how to play baseball in the cold. I still don't. That's why I'm not playing no more, right? And so I was actually living in South Bend, and my agent told me this. Now at the time, guys, I'm taking care of my brother, my sister. I had my wife, my son on the way. I'm making $1,200 a month before tax for 8 months out of the year playing baseball. And so I'm literally doing it for the love of the game. And I told my agent, anything you can get me for free, please get me that, right? If it's bats, if it's gloves, if it's cleats, if it's free, it's my friend. And so he did exactly that. He had me staying in a place and it was free. And the place was called St. Paul's Retirement Community. That's what the place was called. I was living there. Average age was like 74, 75. And he was serious too. And I'm living there, and it was awesome, to be honest with you. I started living there. And as soon as I got there, they had a huge fat head of me, a big poster on the wall. It said, welcome, Chris Singleton. We love you, grandson. I was like, what? Grandson? I love y'all too, right? And it was an amazing experience. And I'm living at St. Paul's, and I started asking them questions about race, right? Because at St. Paul's, I think there was only 3 Black people at St. Paul's. I was one of the 3. Everybody else is white, and they were older. I wanted to learn about segregation. because I didn't want to just read about it in my books or from TV or from a movie. I wanted to ask them directly because I wanted to hear what they went through. And they were white too. And so I was like, I know that's kind of a touchy subject for some people. They get awkward. They don't want to talk about it. But I said, you know what? Let me ask you guys some stuff. And so I started interviewing people, and I interviewed one lady, and I'll share the interview with you guys right now. So the lady's name was Esther. She was 85 years young. She had white hair. She was a white lady, had white hair, wasn't even gray. But she was beautiful, man. She had like a skincare routine or something. I don't know what she had going on, but she had something going on, right? And she told me, don't call me Esther, call me Grandma E. And so me and Grandma E were talking, and I stopped and asked her about race. And she was telling me how, you know, she used to be embarrassed to talk about things like that, but she's so old now, she's just gonna share it freely. And we talked about some things, and she said she was in a place where there was nobody didn't look like her, right? She was in a place where her school, everybody looked like her. Her house, everybody looked like her. And I started thinking, I don't know if you guys ever seen the movie The Help, but I was like, there's no way that everybody in your house looked just like you too. And she was like, Chris, that was a movie. This is how my life was. And so I said, okay, so you had nobody to teach you differently. She said, no, you're right, Chris. I had nobody to teach me differently. Not until I got older and I started working with people from around the world. I said, okay. And so we kept going to the interview, and she stops me. And now I'm thinking she's getting uncomfortable. But she stops me and says, Chris, let me show you my great grandbabies. I said, yes, ma'am. She pulled out her cell phone, smartphone too. She was on it. Like she knew everything. Grandma E was my kind of person. And she pulled out a picture, and there was two little girls, and she said they're twins. And one was black and one was white. And I said to her, you know, Grandma E, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I'm not the dumbest either, right? There ain't no way they're twins. Ain't no way. Because I'm talking about one was dark skinned black too, like needing the lights back on type of black, not like, you know, Patrick Mahomes or Dr. Avery. No, I'm talking about dark skin. And she said, no, Chris, they are twins. Let me tell you how. She told me the story. Grandson was supposed to have twins. Little baby girl passed away. They adopted this black baby girl, raised her up. 8 years old now. They're princesses and they're twins. I said, that's awesome. That's sweet. Now I get it. She said, yeah, Chris, let me tell you what they call themselves. I said, what do they call themselves, Grandma E? She said, chocolate and vanilla ice cream. I said, oh, I get it, you know, because one's black, one's white. It's cute. That's a little weird, though. I said, Grandma E. And they licking themselves or something like that, Grandma E? She said, no, they're not licking themselves, Chris. I taught them that. And I said, Grandma E, why would you teach them to call themselves chocolate and vanilla ice cream? She said, Chris, I taught them that because I want them to know, although they're different on the outside, on the inside where it counts, they're just as sweet. And immediately I started thinking, man, I wish my mother's killer would have had a grandma like Grandma E. Right? I wish my mother's killer would have had a teacher that would love on them like Grandma E. And say, you know what? We should see color. Right? Bob, I see that you look different than me. Alma, I see that you look different than me. I see, Catherine, you look different than I do. Colleen, you look, everybody, I understand. I do see color. But you know what? I'm not going to automatically write you off or judge you based on something you didn't control. Right? We look different than one another. Yes, we do. I celebrate that. My wife's from Brazil. I'm not going to act like my wife's not from Brazil. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to see color. Yes, I do, but I celebrate it. I celebrate the different cultures that I come into contact. I want to learn more. Am I going to pretend like my wife, her family just eats the same food as us? No, I want to eat some of that picanha, right? That Brazilian steak. I want to learn about it. So we should see color, but we should celebrate it. Whether you're chocolate or vanilla or mint chocolate, right? The most disgusting ice cream there is, mint chocolate. I don't know how y'all like mint chocolate, right? But whatever ice cream flavor, whatever you may be, whatever first language you have, like we should celebrate those things instead of just saying we don't see them. So let's go out and teach like Grandma E and love people, man, because at the end of the day, like regardless of where you're from or what you look like, even if I don't agree with you, guess what? I may not like you, but I'm gonna love you. And I believe that love is always stronger than hate. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Chris.
On behalf of all of us, those who are on mute.
All right, they can put their reactor up there. We can show love or whatever. It was amazing.
Thank you.
So at this time, also, anyone who has a question, you could put it in the chat, have a couple questions. Just Chris, thank you for those so many different insights and perspectives that you have. Even being young, you still have been on a journey and you have really shared that with us. Really appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to, you know, be such a strong young man and share all that information. It was really very touching. One of the questions that was sent to me, pull that up for you as other folks are getting. One of the things that came up, Chris, I have a couple here. It says, do racial issues in sports, in your case, baseball, emerge in the clubhouse?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that the Cubs did, not every team does something like this, but we went through our English teacher would actually sit all the players down and talk about the different cultures that we had in the locker room. So a lot of my Latin American friends, they were super lovey-dovey, right? They would just put your arm around you. I'm like, man, I just got the shower. You know what I'm saying? Come on now. And she would describe, hey, that's how they grew up. That may be their culture. And so she shared different things like that. That was really good for us as we started. But there should be more training. And I've actually partnered with teams like the Texans, teams like the Washington Wizards, teams like the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like they brought me in to speak thus far. And so I plan on to continue doing that kind of stuff. But there definitely should be more of these things. And a lot of players now, they're nervous to speak out, to be honest with you. They're nervous because, you know, let's say they're not the franchise player, right? They're not the player that's making 30 million a year. They're the player that's making 3 million a year. And now, you know, 3 million a year is still a good living, of course, but they're not the face of the team. So they're thinking if they say something, it's like, oh, well, who is this guy? He's like the 12th guy off the bench. Nobody cares what you have to say. So a lot of guys are still scared, even though they're in the NBA, in the NFL. They're nervous to say certain things. So I definitely think they should speak out more. Now, I forgot something that I wanted to mention.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot which breakout it was, but I think it was Bob who was talking about like the relationships he had for teaching in school, where I think he said it was 80% or more African-American population in that school. And it was really cool for him to build relationships. So I think that's phenomenal. And if you have the luxury, I think it's a luxury if you have the luxury of being in a diverse community, then you are one of the people that can create sustainable change, I believe. Just because they see you a lot, they know you, or they will know you, and you can make change in that way. So congrats to you, Bob, and keep doing what you do, my man.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions in the chat, or one of the comments, was your message of forgiveness is so powerful, you know, given what you went through. And then can you talk about the response that you get from Black people who disagreed with you about forgiving the shooter?
Yeah, I can. There have been some instances where people will say, you know what, Chris, you forgave him, you let him off the hook. And it's like, you know, I don't think the death penalty is letting somebody off the hook. But I understand where people are coming from with that. But what I always say is, you know, if I didn't forgive my mother's killer, let's say I had revenge in my heart. I had, you know, disgust and hatred 24/7. Like, how would that make me better? I have no clue. But I know how forgiveness has freed me from thinking that all white people are bad. I don't think that. Forgiveness has freed me from that. It's freed me from PTSD of always thinking somebody's out to get me. And so forgiveness has done so many things. But I still do the work. I can understand that rebuttal if somebody would say, Chris, you forgave your mother's killer and now you just sit down and do nothing. No, I would understand that then. But I've actually, you know, devoted my life to going out there and sharing about this. So that's a good question. But to be honest, I don't really get that too much.
Okay. So you spoke about love overcoming hate, but for us to love with need to respect and honor everyone's story. So how do we impact students and change our systems when many of our student stories and truths are left out?
That's good. So a lot of the best educators I see, they're vulnerable with their students, right? if I'm a student and I've gone through something, I'm not going to tell you until I know you've gone through something similarly, right? And if you've never gone through anything, and until I know you love me enough to actually care and not just hear it in one ear and out the other ear, I'm not going to share it. So I think that's good. I also have seen people do like human dignity training is what they'll call it. And they'll have their students submit just different things about their lives, different things they've gone through, so they can take that into account. Like, okay, now I see what we're really working with here. And so I've seen some school districts, some schools do stuff like that. And that's been pretty beneficial thus far, but obviously we still need some more research to see how impactful or non-impactful that is. But those are a couple of things I think every educator can do.
Mm-hmm. So did the youth of your brother and sister affect how they felt towards your mother's killer? You know, being that they were so young, you know, did early on in their conversation, I'm sure it was different from, you know, the years that have gone by. So was it impactful for their takeaways from that?
Yeah, so my brother was 12, my sister was 15. My brother's now 18 and sister's 21. And so initially I feel it was just a lot of sadness. There was nothing else from them. They were just trying to figure out, you know, where they were going to live, if I was going to be able to take care of them. Like I don't think they were focused on my mother's killer at all at first. But as they got older, especially my sister, she wanted to learn more about the case, learn more about the reasoning behind it. And my sister, I call my sister super woke. Like, she's super woke. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I'm woke, but my sister, she been up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I make fun of her because she's one of the kinds of people that ask you, you know, what time were you born? And you'll say, you know, 9 o'clock. She's like, okay, that's why you're a night person. I'm like, what? Get out of my face. You know what I'm saying? But that's how she is. But no, I think at first they didn't really, you know, think about the things that went on. They were sad. Then as they grew older, they wanted to learn more about the case and the reasoning behind it.
Mm-hmm. So I really resonated with the fact that you said, share your story first, so that, you know, it's a lead in into the discussion, or when folks are trying to make these preconceived notions about how you're feeling. And then I saw another message in the chat here, a question saying that it's so important for us to take the time to hear the other stories first, instead of jumping, you know, to judge someone, especially when we're experiencing such disconnection in our society. So how do you feel about that comment?
Yeah, well, I'd also say this. So sometimes I'll literally meet with somebody that is on the total opposite end of the spectrum. So I think there are people that are anti-racist. Like, that's me. I'm anti-racist. I think there are people that say, you know what, Chris, I've thought this way for 40 years. I don't know if I ever like a black person. That's just, I'm gonna be honest with you. I know some people that say, Chris, I've thought this way for 50 years because my grandfather, something happened with this, and I'll never like a white person. Like, I've heard both ends of the spectrum. But I believe the people that we can most impact are the people that say, you know what, maybe I grew up like this, but I'm actually listening for the first time. You know, I want to at least hear what you got to say, because I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it, but I want to at least hear. And oftentimes I think we get burnt out by trying to go after this person, where I share the good news with that person about love and unity and all that good stuff. But it's very hard to change that person's heart that's been thinking that way for 50 years. Now, you know who can change that person's heart? The person that's been thinking that way for 50 years, but now is listening to me. And I think that person, whether it's their spouse, whether it's their child or their parent, that's the person that I think we should continue to put our energy into and say, you know, maybe you have thought this way for a while, but you don't have to think that way forever. There was a guy who said to me the other day, Chris, I'm 57, and I realized today for the first time that racism is a choice, and I don't want to be that way. So that stuff is powerful. So keep going.
All right. I have another question from the audience. You mentioned about the cancel culture. As someone who has a mission to talk about such a sensitive topic, have you ever experienced this yourself? How did you handle this and recommend others who are afraid to stand up and share their personal stories?
Yeah. So number one, I'm in a space where I feel like, can I get canceled? Yes, but I also have credibility because you know, my mother was literally murdered because she's Black. So there is so much racism that happened to me in my life that it's not like I'm just coming out of nowhere, you know, just a Black person just always talking about race for no reason. No, I'm talking about it because number one, it happens. Yes, so everybody should speak about it. But number two, it literally affected my life. And so I haven't, you know, fortunate enough. I've been fortunate that I haven't gotten the, you know, want to cancel Chris for this or that. And I don't plan on ever getting that. But if you do, well, number one, you should be able to share your story or share whatever it may be in an open space. Like this is an open space. If somebody were to tell me, Chris, I think you're full of baloney. This happened to me 10 years ago, and now I feel X, Y, and Z. This is a great place to do it. Now, I do believe in freedom of speech, but it's not everywhere you should probably share that story until you know how you can refine it in a way that may not be as offensive, you know, because the worst thing a person can do is try to throw a brick of anti-racism instead of placing it on somebody like a blanket. That's the way that I think about it. I don't want to just throw the brick or, you know, run them over with that. I want to place it on them, right? And that's what I think we should all we should adopt that line of thinking whenever we're talking about these tough conversations.
Absolutely. And forgiveness, that's a tough conversation. And I think I remember seeing a question here about what goes into the work of forgiving. I mean, for you to be at a young age deciding, you know, that you're going to forgive someone that did something so horrendous, you know, what kind of process was your mind going through to get to that notion?
Yeah. So for me, it was almost instantaneous. That's why I think it was something out of this world that placed forgiveness on my heart. But practically what I say for forgiveness is, number one, there has to be something on the other side of forgiveness, right? If there's nothing on the other side of it, why would you do it? There's no reward. To be honest, we're human beings. We want rewards from doing something. If we work out for, you know, 2 years straight, we want to see some progress, right? You know what I'm saying? So I think there has to be a reward on the other side of it. So for me, forgiveness is a process of, number one, saying it out loud. I forgive my mother's killer, Dylan Roof, for taking 9 lives, one of those being my mom. Why? Because it's going to allow me to not hate all white people. It's going to allow me to move forward in my life, not move on, because some things you can't just move on from, but you can move forward. And it's going to also allow me to be a great husband and great father. And so there has to be something on the other side of it. And I think the process is saying it out loud. So hopefully that kind of sums up some things about forgiveness.
V, do we have time for one more? Or
Yeah, we actually have 5 more minutes.
okay, cool. So how do we work together so that hearing each other's story becomes something we can do without feeling defensive, especially whites listening to the counter story of people of color?
I'm sorry, one more time. How can we what? I'm sorry.
Okay. How do we work together so that hearing each other's story becomes something we can do without feeling defensive, especially when a white person is listening to the counter story of a person of color?
Yeah, so I think you have to go into those conversations without an ego. There's no right or wrong if somebody's sharing their story. It's their truth, okay? Now, you may not agree with whatever it may be, but it's their truth. I literally had a guy who was running a hospital. I'm just going to say the state. He was in the state of Georgia. A guy was running the hospital. He's a VP of this hospital, or not the VP. He was I think he was COO of the hospital. And he talked about a story of him, you know, getting beat up by a group of Black men when he was in high school. Those dudes went to jail, and he was beat up pretty bad. And he needed surgery on his face, the whole 9 yards. It was really bad. And he said, to be honest, Chris, I've always looked at Black people in a different way because of what happened to me, right? And I know it's bad, but I've always had this sort of, you know, I don't like type of mentality when it comes to certain Black people, especially young Black men. And when I hear this, do I agree with that? Absolutely not. But am I going to get defensive and just immediately strike back with something? No, because he's sharing his truth. And so when you go into these conversations, you have to put your ego to the side and listen to somebody's truth, because if you go into it thinking I may learn something about the way that somebody else thinks about, that has a different perspective. If you go into it thinking about learning instead of thinking about changing their mind, then I think we actually get somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Good point. So there are a lot of educators on this call, and just because I think the work that we are always thinking about is how we can, have these culturally responsive conversations with teachers, and also with, and how do we bring it into the classrooms? And just in your opinion, what do you think is a age that we should start to have these conversations with our babies, in terms of, because so many things have happened, throughout history and through the country, and not in a short span, that has impacted the babies. And when I say babies, even those students down in first and second grade. So how do you speak to students at that age level? Or do you think it is something that should be mentioned at such an early age?
Yeah, so I haven't, I saw somebody in the chat talk about my children's books. So I think that's a good way when you introduce books to kids that way. But I'm not the kind of person that wants to take away a kid's innocence. So I'm not going to tell them about George Floyd, right? I might not do that to a first grader. But I can share about the differences that we all have, whether it may be language, whether it may be the way that people grow up, whether maybe some people grow up in poverty, so I'll share about those different things, but I don't feel like it's my place to tell a 6-year-old or 7-year-old about how someone was murdered. I don't think that's my place, or that's an educator's place that young. But I think there are ways with children's books. Even with me right now, my son, he's 3, and I read him my books, of course, just even though he don't realize that I wrote them. But I'll do that. But I also will explain to him, hey, buddy, not everybody speaks Portuguese. So you might have to say that word in English. And he doesn't understand sometimes because, automatically wants to say this in Portuguese. But that's a time that I can teach him, right? Not everybody speaks this language, buddy. There's actually so many different languages around the world. And so those different moments are teaching moments for me. And I think they should be for everybody. There's no age that's too young.
Awesome. I'm thinking we might be at our time. I'm not sure, but or V, is there time for one more, or?
Yeah.
Okay. If anyone else, well, there's a comment. This is as a teacher, 5th grade teacher in the chat. I teach the Jackie Robinson story and how he broke the color barrier in baseball. So probably just having these analogies around how, folks of color can show that they can, progress and move forward through, like you being a baseball player, and, through their sport or through some kind of talent that they have, is another good way of, showing impactfulness and power.
I totally agree. I wrote this book last year. Well, it just released this year. I wrote it last year, but it's called Your Life Matters. It's a children's book. And I basically have different Black heroes telling my main character how much they matter, right? Their voice matters. Their courage matters. So it's different Black heroes like Harriet Tubman, like Jackie Robinson, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of my heroes growing up, Oprah, right? Oprah is one of my heroes because my mom used to always watch that. So she loved Oprah, so I love Oprah. So I have just different Black heroes that have overcome the obstacles and still been able to create a great life. So one of the things I say is, when tragedy happens, right, maybe people that look like me have been at a disadvantage for a while. I accept that that's real, but I also think if I see this person be able to do it, representation matters. I truly think it does matter. So if I see somebody's able to do it that looks like me, I think I can just as well. So I hope that in writing that book, kids will think the same thing.
Nice. I have another question here. So someone asked, did you ever hear the story of your mother's killer? And what was that story?
Yeah, so I actually looked into it, and he you know, to be honest, they try to keep a lot of that stuff secretive because they don't want you to, you know, know where his family is and all that kind of stuff. But they say he grew up, you know, in a public school. You know, he wasn't a rich family, wasn't a poor middle class family, and around the time of Trayvon Martin, he became fixated on how Black people were ruining the world. And he basically would find articles supporting his line of thought. And he made up in his mind, hey, by killing Black people, I'll start a race war and I'll be doing everybody a favor. That was his story. And so graciously, that didn't happen where, you know, we didn't have a race war, but he did win the small battle of taking those 9 lives. So that was his story, unfortunately. And you know what? I actually said to myself, I would go speak to my mother's killer. I would try to figure out at the core of where it all came from. Where did that all start, right? Other than Trayvon Martin, like what websites was it? What books were you reading? I want to know about all of it so I can try to do away with it. But the only reason why I wouldn't do that is if any other family member said, Chris, don't give them the time of day. And I would respect their wishes. So that's probably where I'm at with that.
Well, just again, we just thank you so much for taking your time to come out and jump on this call and just share this your amazing story, and really appreciate, you know, that you're really, you push our thinking too, you know, just as telling your story. It's not just about your story too, but it's how it is impactful for, you know, as we continue our journey and our work. So just from everyone, just thank you so much. And I'm sure folks are putting stuff in the chat thanking you. Really appreciate it. And hopefully maybe at some point we'll have another visit from you, but we're really excited about the books that we have that you've written that some of these listeners will get this evening. And again, Chris, thank you so much. And, you know, may God bless you as you continue your journey, and just thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much.